Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. I just love that peaceful music at the beginning. It gives me a chance to take a breath and prepare to be on camera. And so I really enjoy that. I'm thrilled for all the folks in the house already. So that's great. And I am glad you're here. The resurrection is really important. And seeing how Jesus handles the Sadducees' attack on that very doctrine and trying to discredit him in relationship to that is really an important thing. And so we're going to have some good times going ahead and doing that. Now I'm going to go ahead and share the screen right off the bat here. There we go. I can make myself bigger, but I want you to be able to see this. We are at the part where Jesus is now going to be accosted by the Sadducees. The Herodians have taken their best shot. And now it's time for the Sadducees to take their shot. And then we will see where Jesus goes from there and how he handles things. And so I'm going to move things over and get started. Now, I owe a bit of an apology to Susan, a.k.a. Slam RN. When I woke up this morning, I realized that what looked like a hay might have been a chet. And so while there is no cabbage word there, I mistyped last night in my haste to get that up, and I misspelled the word. And so we're going to do a little nosh of Hebrew. I took that video down. I was disappointed with myself. I really, really like to teach accurately, but this is important. When a teacher finds out that he has been inaccurate in some area, what he needs to do is correct himself. And so I am doing that tonight and giving you the real scoop on the word. So you should be able to see that. I'm going to go ahead and let you see that. What you should see there is that it's kohel. Now I say that with a little bit of a guttural as opposed to kohel. And you see how similar they sound, especially if said the right way quickly. And so I stuck up the material on that, and you can see that right up there. And if you're looking along with me, you will note that it means assembly, assembled group of people. There's no occurrence indicating the process of summoning. That's a different Hebrew word. But it's used as far as the synagogue, and they're noting the forms that it occurs in. So apologies for last night, but I wanted to take care of that. Yes, mea culpa. And so let me correct that little misspelling. Thank you, Nate. I also point out that we are trying to build our support group. So thank you for sticking up the chosen people. I will show that real quick because Nate was good enough to put that up. The Patreon is also important as far as like funding the videos, and that's the difference. I don't hit my funds from chosen people for that. I hit the Patreon funds for that. So you guys are already responsible for a lot of material. But there's a difference. Our missionary fund has certain functions and Patreon does, but I want to encourage chosen people. We're trying to build our support team. That's enough of the shameless commerce. What I really want to do is get back into this. So I wanted to clarify that from last night. Okay. And I'm going to continue through that. We want to review who the Sadducees were, because think of it as like a baseball game. Okay. And like the first pitcher was the Herodians, and they tried to strike Jesus out, but it didn't work. And so now up pitching for the opposition are the Sadducees. We talked about them before, but let's renew their batting record, what they believe. Now, I sound like a baseball guy, and really, I don't watch a lot of baseball. I did enjoy going to the stadium, Wrigley Field. I was a Cubbies guy, our side of Chicago, and so my dad took me once to see a live game complete with the obligatory, snack thing. And Harry Carey was still around. That's a name very few people are going to remember. And so I remember that. And so now up at bat are the Sadducees. The one thing we do know about the Sadducees is that they rejected beliefs in the afterlife, resurrection, and post-mortem judgment. And we talked about this last time, but you just need to know this because this is where they're going to attack Jesus. So this is their big strikeout ball here, their strikeout pitch, and they're going to try to get Jesus on this issue because they want to discredit him. Now they're less popular with the people. Okay. And they're not as popular as the Pharisees. The Pharisees had more popularity with the people. Oh, wow. Skokie. Sorry, wow. I'm going to throw out the name Des Plaines. It was right near Park Ridge and Evanston and that area, and see if that's familiar to a fellow Chicagoan. And actually, when the Cubbies did win, I went out and got a Chicago dog, like authentic, just to celebrate. Okay. That's where they're going to attack him. Okay. They're less popular. Now, why do they have any control at all? Because they controlled the temple precincts. So if you wanted to go do offerings, you were dealing with the Sadducees, whether you liked it or not. The Essenes withdrew from the entire temple system. They went out and did copying in the desert. And the Pharisees did indeed stick around. Someone else, but they didn't have the same control. Wow, it is so good to see fellow Chicagoans. That was like where I grew up. Okay. And so that's where they were. I'm pulling up the text here. Now I'm going to go ahead and for my reading's sake here, I'm going to let myself see the text on the Logos Bible. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that up there. Now you're not seeing that. You're seeing it on the slide, but it's the same text. Now if you have your Bibles, you can go to the section that's listed on the slide, but sometimes the slide is a little difficult for me to see. I'm hoping it's coming in better for you. The same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, "Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother's wife shall his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first died after he had married and having no offspring left his wife to his brother. Now, likewise, the second also, and the third, even to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 shall she be? For they all had her." Okay, now that's basically what's on the slide, and that's their attack. All right. And so let's keep moving on here. Now, first of all, Jesus has already just dealt with the Herodians. This has like been the day that just doesn't stop. Okay. And so it's the same day. And I put the Greek up there. It's kind of in that day. I mean, if I'm being really, really wooden, it's sort of like that, except for the form of the words, which we're going to see. And it ends up meaning the same day because a form is used. Now, this is a little technical, but it doesn't hurt. Okay. There are different case endings in Greek to indicate the function of words in a sentence. Now, we do it through English order. We say the red barn, and we know the word red modifies the word barn. In fact, I never learned English as well as when I was taking Hebrew and Greek in seminary. If you want to learn English, sometimes learning another language is really helpful for that. And so we have parts of speech. Now, I keep thinking back to when I was a kid, and we had this thing called it was called Schoolhouse Rock. And it was really good at teaching kids parts of speech. And so when we say things, we know based on English, the positioning. Okay, we put the noun first, then the verb, then the subject usually, and then the modifiers modify those parts of speech. And they're all related by where they fit. Now, Greek doesn't do that. Greek sticks all these endings. So we had to learn all these endings. And interestingly enough, this is a fairly easy case to recognize, but this is called the dative case. I sometimes mispronounced it in Greek class and was corrective. I called it the datative case. It's not. It's the dative case. And there are different ways that this case is used. Now, this is a dative of time. Now, the genitive case has a genitive of time, and the accusative case has an accusative of time. If you want to know about the accusative case, it's what we call the indirect object. All right. James hit a ball to John. That's accusative. The genitive is what we usually use for possession. We say David's horse. Hebrew actually is a way to mark the genitive. These cases have that, but they don't look like this. This is distinctly a dative of time. And they're different. A genitive of time is different than a dative of time. Now, why do I do this? Because even though it kind of says in that day, because it's a dative of time, it's indicating a time period and it emphasizes the same day. And so the emphasis that's being drawn here is that this is all happening on the same day. Okay. Now, what the gospel writers do is they affirm Josephus's understanding of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection. Now, why is that useful for us? Because certain people who are against the gospel, particularly guys like Rabbi Singer, will make the claim that the gospels are inaccurate, contradictory, and untrustworthy documents. But interestingly enough, everything we know about the Sadducees indicates that the gospel writers are being totally historically accurate, contrary to what they're accused of. Okay? Now, why would the Sadducees believe that there was no resurrection? Ooh. That is a good question. Is there a nominative of time? I can't remember any from Greek class, but I know there are words in the nominative that can indicate time. But I don't recall ever going over a nominative of time or seeing it in Wallace's Greek grammar. So I'm going to say there are two possibilities. Either I don't remember it, or there isn't one. I would have to pull out Wallace to find that out. I don't want to do that at this time because I'd have to reopen Logos and pull up Daniel Wallace's Greek grammar. But what I can do is do some looking, and then at the next broadcast, if you're there, I can do a quick shout out and see what I find. But I just don't remember one, interestingly enough. So I'll just say nothing comes to mind. Why would these nice Jewish boys, right, not believe in resurrection? By the way, Reformed Judaism doesn't really have a concept of resurrection. Judaism says very little about the afterlife. Their argument goes something like this. They believe that only the Torah was authoritative. Now, if you think that's weird, my dad used to pull that with the Ten Commandments. Like the rest of the Pentateuch was not as inspired as the Torah. And so what the Sadducees did is they looked at the Torah. They regarded the the writings and the prophets is less authoritative. Now, I'm not saying that's orthodox, okay? Proper belief. Big shout out to Air Church, who just came in. But I want to go ahead and say that this is what they believed. And so their argument was that since there was no direct evidence for resurrection in the Torah, they could rule out the possibility of resurrection. There are a lot of problems with this sort of approach, but I'm just letting you know where they got their ideas from. They were non-supernaturalists in not believing in miracles really of any. That's why they didn't really like the prophets. They did allow for the Pentateuch to be inspired, which, by the way, has some miracle accounts. But that's where they're coming from. And so I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right spot here real quick. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Now they're going to use a type of argumentation called reductio ad absurdum. And this is often used in argumentations from the Latin. And what you essentially do is that you show that it would lead to absurdity to believe a certain position. Okay. And so what they're going to do is build a hypothetical case and say, if you believe the resurrection, given this hypothetical case, you would end up in an absurd sort of situation, an impossible situation. So therefore, we can rule out resurrection. Okay, now let's look at their extreme hypothetical. In their hypothetical story, a woman marries a man who had 6 brothers. And this man who marries, had 6 brothers, died, and he had no children. Now, it's important that he had no children. Under the provision of the law, she was given to the second brother. I know that doesn't sound real appetizing, but God did that in order to preserve the tribes, because the tribal lineage went through the father, and so his entire line was jeopardized. It was very important to the Jewish people, and there's still a sense in which that is important. And so she is given to the second brother, who raises up a line, and the first child he has with her falls under the brother's line and is noted that way. Now, in the case of the story, the second brother likewise dies having no children, and then is given to the third brother, who dies having no children. The pattern repeats itself all the way through the brothers of the woman's first husband. So this is the hypothetical that they're putting out there. All right? And this is their hypothetical. Now, what are they basing this on? Well, they're basing this on a provision of the law that's covered in Levirate marriage. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her. Now, remember, I always mark these not for children, but that's basically the idea of intimate relations, okay? Take her as his wife and perform the duty of the husband's brother to her. That's raising up a line for his brother so that his brother is not left out of the tribes of Israel. This was an old provision in the law, okay? And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed the name of the dead brother. So he's raising a line for the brother, okay? That the name may not be blotted out of Israel. There's the concern. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, okay, so he has objections. Now, he could have economic objections, because with the raising of that firstborn for his brother, there's property that goes along with the wife. And we see in the book of Ruth that that isn't really to the first kinsman redeemer's benefit. So he says he'll take a pass, and he has to follow the ritual here. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then the brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal, and from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. Now, this is a shame. You don't care. You don't love your brother. You don't want to make sure that his name is preserved in Israel. And so you are shameful, and you will not do your proper duty. Now, this horrifies us Westerners because we have a lot of things related to that intimacy that are related to love. Marriage was a little bit more geared, like it was in Europe, towards practical considerations. I'm not knocking down romantic love, okay? I'm not being nasty. I'm not being anti-violent, unromantic here before February 14th or anything like that. But I'm stating that it was very important to preserve the lines of Israel in order to preserve the nation. And so these sorts of considerations were around. Now, first of all, using the specific hypothetical with the provision of Levirate marriage, they then ask who shall be married to in the Olam Haba. I'm going to talk about that word Olam Haba. Okay, but I translated it for you, world to come, and it's Jewish terminology for the afterlife. Jewish people do not spend a lot of time talking about heaven. There are reasons for this. First of all, the Jewish hope is the kingdom on earth. Understand that. They were promised that there would come one who would deliver from sin, would set up the kingdom, God's rule on earth, and they were very interested in that. And so understand that whereas Christians are looking to I want to be careful, they look more to heaven, Jews looked more to the kingdom. Now understand this in terms of Matthew, because Matthew's constantly talking about the kingdom, which is a very Jewish concern. So I opened up the Gospel of Matthew before I was saved, and I kept seeing the kingdom of heaven. That really made a lot of sense to me. On a gut level, when I can connect it, that made sense. Any Jewish reader who reads Matthew is going to connect with this concept of the kingdom. And when I think about following Jesus, I think about being a kingdom citizen and following the king and his kingdom. So there's a little personal confession there. The argument is, since she was the wife of all the brothers, thus by their example, they were hoping to make resurrection seem like foolishness, since she'd be the wife of all seven, right? She was married to all seven. So whose wife is she going to be? Is she going to be the wife of the last guy she married? You've got this crazy situation going on here that in their mind is unresolvable because she was lawfully married to all. Now, the first problem is that death terminates the marriage covenant. My wife, if she was a widow, would be free to remarry. So, there's some real weird looseness with the reasoning here, but I just want to point out to you how they're trying to leverage this. Okay. Now, the first funny thing to me is I'm a mystery buff. We've been able to watch a lot of BBC. I love British mysteries by and large, especially the older ones. Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle. I curl up with a good Miss Marple on BBC television or something, and I really kind of like that. And so this sounds like a weird plot from a Miss Marple. Okay, really? There was a guy among you that had 7 brothers? This is like an extreme hypothetical. A woman might live through 1 or 2 guys dying on her, but 7. Can anyone say Black Widow? What's she doing? Killing these guys so that they're dying? This is like a very extreme hypothetical that they are using. This is not in the realm of what is likely to happen in real life. I'm not expecting a woman to marry, like 7 guys and they keel over and they're all, this is like, wow. Either the family's got some real inherited problems here, or she's helping them along. But That is a use of an extreme hypothetical. I'd say, does this pass the everyman test of common sense that this is likely? But they want to stretch the point here because they want to really back Jesus into a corner. It's their turn at bat. And so they think they've got him. Now, their assumption is if resurrection existed at all marriages would be enforced in the afterlife. There's no evidence in Scripture to support this position. You know, they don't accept resurrection because it's not in the Torah, but they make an assumption that's equally not in the Torah. So when you're looking at a hypothetical or a dilemma like this, the assumption the person's making can be used equally against their position. And I've done that with some of Singer's videos, okay? It's called equal weights and measures. The criteria you use on another person's argument equally can be used on yours. And so I'd say, well, this assumption isn't even very good. Not only is the case like extreme, something that you'd find in a mystery novel, but the assumption that they're making isn't necessarily backed up by anything. Now, they are deceived and led astray, and Jesus is going to go ahead and say just that. Okay? You are not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God. It's the way the King James puts it. The Greek word translated mistaken doesn't mean simply that they made a little error here in some slight way. It means that they're deliberately misled. And I put up the word, which, by the way, in other forms, in its simplest form, pelanao, is not used, but this form is used. Planea is the way it looks from my thing. By the way, if you're wondering about the stuff after the word, it has to do with one of the case endings. Okay, so the Greek always gives like the word in its form and then like a case ending related to how it would appear. And I'm not going to dig too far into that. This is Low and Needham, just so that you know. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to really put this in here because I really want that. Yes, please tell your friends. We want to get bigger. That would be nice. I mean, I'd like to see that. Okay, let's go further. But the idea Jesus is saying is he's not giving them you're a little bit off here. He's really saying you're led astray. You are deceived. You do not know what you are talking about spiritually. You are teaching bad stuff. Okay. Now, why don't they know? They have the same Torah. Okay. He uses the term oida. Okay. And oida, you have to be a little careful. There's another word for know in Greek, and they're very, very similar and close. And I don't want to make big distinctions. Sometimes people make too much distinctions between related words. Okay. But in this case, the know there isn't just they forgot to get told. Okay. You don't know. And because you don't know the truth, you are wandering in all sorts of places that are not good. Okay. And so he indicates the Sadducees lacked, or they possessed a lack of sound doctrine and understanding of the Scriptures. You do not know what God can do, and you don't know what God said. By the way, I reserve that line when I'm talking sometimes to somebody who's got a hardened, very, very false position scripturally. And I will say it is simple. I would say this is like true of Tovia Singer. You know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. Now, that's a little harsh, but he is misled. And they have a lack of sound doctrine. Now, by saying this, he indicates that he found the Pharisees' belief in resurrection to be totally orthodox, that is in line with the Scriptures. In other words, Jesus agreed with the Pharisees. as far as resurrection was concerned. So Jesus and the Pharisees did not disagree that much on doctrine as they did on practice. Now, in the case of the Sadducees, Jesus disagreed strongly with their doctrine. But with the Pharisees, it was more an issue of practice, and he regarded them far more in line with the scriptures as far as their teaching and orthodox. Now, I say that because sometimes in Sunday school, we do not represent these sects very accurately. I remember watching the donut hole man there and was a little unhappy because while it made perfect sense to kids and it was making it simple, it might have made it just a little too simple. So I'm just making very clear that Jesus says, look, I don't even have to go to your practice. Your doctrine's off. Okay. Now he's going to talk to them about the world to come. All right. And Jesus referred to the afterlife and the kingdom in terms of very Jewish terms, the olam haba. By the way, that's your second Hebrew phrase that you can know. You can practice that, the olam, which is sometimes translated eternity, forever, but it's also translated world. The olam haba, the world to come. Now, Jesus says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels. So Jesus is now telling them about the afterlife and saying, you've made an assumption about the afterlife and about resurrection that is totally doctrinally false. And that's why your hypothetical doesn't do anything. Okay? Now, what about not being given in marriage? That really used to bother me. As a happily married man, we're a couple, but I would call myself happily married. I have a wife who puts up with me, which is really good. And must be remembered that what God isn't ruling out is love and relationship. Marriage is exclusive. Better be exclusive. There's a word for when it becomes unexclusive with one partner, right? And so what disappears is the exclusivity of marriage. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs. A good book by Randy Elkhorn is called Heaven. I didn't go ahead and post it. It's got some things in it, but I really love the picture of us doing things in heaven, having actual jobs, and that this is preparation for the position we'll hold in heaven. And so I really like all that. He does a good job with ethnic distinctions and other things. And he makes heaven makes some great points. But love and relationships not what's lost. Exclusivity is what's lost. So panic not. It will not be a world without affection in the sense of caring and love. It will not be a world in which you won't recognize people, but it will be a world in which you won't have exclusivity of relationship. But wait a minute, don't we all turn into angels? We will be like angels, right? Now, why do I do this? I watched It's a Wonderful Life. It's one of my favorite movies. I think it makes a great point. But we got Clarence, the old guy, becoming an angel second class here and having to get his wings. And then we have the show that used to be on way back, okay? We're talking names that some people won't remember, called Highway to Heaven. But, it's still floating around. Now, it was very uplifting. God was portrayed positively, but we got this guy who died, who became an angel, who's wandering around the road helping people. Now, what I want to make real clear is people don't become angels, and don't think that some of your unsaved friends don't think that people become angels, because there are some people out there. I've heard a lot of things like that. And so that's an old idea. And so we don't want to read something into the passage that Jesus never meant to say. Why are we like angels? Because we're neither married nor given in marriage. Angels don't marry. There aren't little angels being born. By the way, they don't look like little kids. with wings. Okay, when you meet an angel, people would be terrified. Fear not. Well, if some little baby came at me with wings, I would be really scared. All right. They are not little tiny Sherman babies. So I want to get rid of some of that. That's due to medieval art. Don't know why. Medieval art did some weird things. The point is they don't marry. The number of angels that exist will be the number of angels that have existed. And let me be a little clear. They don't die. Okay, there's no need for replacement. So I'm getting rid of those ideas. When Jesus says they will be like angels, he's not talking about people turning into angels. And I just want to get rid of that. So if you've lost somebody, I'm a firm believer in the afterlife, but I don't think they become Clarence and they have to earn their wings. Okay, just making that clear. Now, their whole basis, as I said earlier, was that they couldn't find it in the Tanakh. But you see, Jesus is going to turn the tables on them because he's going to use the Pentateuch to prove resurrection. Now, watch what he does now concerning. Since you asked about resurrection, now concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God? In where? Okay, in Exodus. This is out of Exodus. So it's right smack in the Pentateuch. Right when Moses is having his encounter with God, which is integral to Sinai in the formation of the nation and the Exodus where God redeems them. So this is an integral passage of Scripture. What did God say? That Jesus is going to make his case on? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. God is not a God of the dead, but of the living. So he quotes Exodus and then draws a conclusion, but he's quoting from the Pentateuch, the Torah, not the prophets or the writings. Because he knows if he quoted from the prophets or the writings, that these guys would just poo-poo it and say, yeah, right, but does the Torah say that? And so he's just circumvented that. But what is God saying? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. On what basis is he making his point? Well, there's the verse in Hebrew up there. Vayomer Anochi. And it looks like Elohai. Okay, Aviach. And then you have the name. Okay, Elohai Abraham, Elohai Yitzhak, I'm having trouble again. But then you have the God of Jacob. Okay, now that's the basic verse. Okay, now Jesus is making an argument based on Anochi. It's a pronoun, but it has a present tense to it. Okay. Now, not present tense like we have present tense, but the idea is I am. It doesn't just mean I, it means I am. Anochi means I am. And so Jesus is making a point out of the way one word is in the text. Okay. And I'm going to go back for a second here. And the point he's making, to look at it together, the point he's making is that if God is the God, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob continue to exist. Okay, there is an afterlife. There is a resurrection. Or he would have said, I was the God. But he doesn't say, I was the God. God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jesus making the point, he's not a God of the dead, but of the living. So they're still around. They're still living. God is still their God. And he's making an argument from the present tense of the word. Okay. And so the argument is there has to be an afterlife. And you guys are wrong about resurrection. Now, this argument occurred within Judaism, and it actually got settled. Belief in the resurrection became one of the cardinal doctrines of rabbinical Judaism. So it's very interesting that the Sadducees are talked about disparagingly in the Talmud, and denial of the resurrection in the Talmud puts one outside of an inheritance eternally. In other words, basically, it's a damnable type of offense. Okay, it puts one outside of the blessing of God. And so it was enshrined that way. And I point out that in the Amidah, that's the standing prayer, the second benediction is all about resurrection. And that's why I still like to recite it, because I really believe in resurrection. So that's not a problem for me, and it's quite beautifully worded. That God will keep faith with those who sleep in the dust, which is those who die, and will raise them. So this argument, the Pharisees not only lose with Jesus, but they lose it in Judaism. Now, there are sects of Judaism and individual Jews that don't believe in resurrection, but as far as classical Jewish thought, they lose. And so when you start seeing some statements of faith that do exist in Judaism, resurrection is usually a part of them. And finally, it becomes a part of Maimonides' 13 articles and the prayer book. So I'm not saying every Jew believes in resurrection. What I'm saying is classical Judaism accepted resurrection and made it the accepted doctrine. What people did after that was a whole other story. Okay. So I like to say it like this. Any Jewish person who doesn't believe in resurrection doesn't have a right to complain about a Jew who follows Jesus. I mean, I could say, look, clearly Judaism teaches resurrection. If you don't follow what Judaism teaches, then why are you bothered at me for not following what Judaism teaches presently? Good verse. Now, the Sadducees would have said to this that Job is not part of the Torah. It's part of the Ketuvim or writings. So they would have poo-pooed it. I don't poo-poo it. You shouldn't poo-poo it. It's inspired. It's scripture. I'm just telling you how they would have dealt with it. They would have said, yeah, but it's not Torah. It's very nice. It's a nice book, but it's not enough to prove it to us. Now let's talk about why resurrection is important. Why do we even bother with this? There are a lot of reasons. Okay. First of all, you need to understand something. I really want to drive this home. The promises to the patriarch about a future kingdom of God on earth were all physical promises. They were not spiritualized. None of the patriarchs took them as spiritualized promises. They took them as being part of a physical kingdom and having a physical existence, and that kingdom being God's kingdom in which earth and heaven are reconciled and all is brought under the rule of God. But it was this earth that was going to be redeemed. So you need to understand something. How does a guy like Abraham hope for the kingdom if he's going to die and it doesn't come when he does? How will he ever inherit the kingdom? How will anybody ever inherit a physical kingdom? Well, they have to be physical to inherit a physical kingdom. And so Jews don't spiritualize the kingdom in the way that amillennialists do. Now, I have dear brothers who are apologists who are amillennial, but I'm sorry, the scriptures don't teach it. They teach a physical kingdom with very physical characteristics. David is promised that his offspring will sit on the throne of his kingdom. I have a really good question. How does Jesus sit on the throne of his father David's kingdom if there's no physical kingdom on earth? Did David ever rule in heaven? When did David ever rule in heaven? If he's going to sit on David's throne has to be understood the way people in that day would have understood it, and the way Mary would have understood it, which would have been David's physical throne. So you have to understand that amillennialism is really a form of Neoplatonistic thinking, or Neoplatonism, that got popularized along with allegorizing as far as the church. And yes, I will blame Augustine of Hippo for spreading this. He was very good about some things, but his eschatology and his understanding of prophecy was a little bit off, because he was taught or ended up being influenced by Origen. Again, literal kingdom. Why do I get that? Because the scriptures indicate it. Let's look at this section of Daniel. Your people will be delivered. Who are Daniel's people? Israel. The sons of your people are the ones who are watched over by Michael, which is interesting to me. I wonder if Michael's aware of Jewish believers as an angel. He probably has some info on that. I don't know. It'd be interesting to say, hey, Michael, I'm really grateful for your service to God and helping to protect my people. That would be like exciting. But then I'd probably be real nervous being, I don't know. That's just, I can't imagine what that would be like. But it would be nice to be able to thank him for that. It's physical Israel, ethnic Israel. Nice little cartoon. I think that's a hippo there. I'm having trouble seeing it, but there we go. Now look, those who sleep in the dust. Now that's Hebrew for die. Okay, you don't take a dirt nap unless you're dead. That's where we get the idea, dirt nap, okay? Those who sleep in the dust, and that's literally what the Hebrew is, okay? Shall awake. Well, look, if dead people awake, you either got Casper the Friendly Ghost or you got resurrection. This is the way that God has for physical people to inherit a physical place in his physical rule on a physical earth. So, to fulfill his promises for them, there would have to be a physical kingdom. Now let's talk about something else here. What did Satan manage to do? Satan managed to corrupt. Sorry about that. Satan managed to corrupt this earth, and I'm going to Romans chapter 8, and I'm going there for a reason. Okay. And I'm going to share this screen. I'm going to do this. It's going to work. Really, it is. Okay, and I'm going to do a new share. Okay, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go to application window, and I'm going to share that. There we are. Now, the creation, that's this present creation in Romans 20, was subject to futility. Not willingly. In other words, the creation didn't decide to do this. I'm going to be subject to futility, but because of him who subjected it in hope. When we sinned, the creation was affected. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from bondage. This creation will be delivered from bondage. This physical creation will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of God's children. That's us, for we know the whole creation, this physical creation, labors with birth pangs until now. Not only that, but we also have the first fruits of the Spirit. We ourselves grown within ourselves, eagerly awaiting the adoption, the redemption of what? Our physical bodies. Okay? And I think the Greek will bear that out. Let me go down to the word body there, move this over a little bit. And the Greek word for body there is the word soma. And so this physical body is groaning, believe me, as I get to be 57 and 58, it's groaning even more. Okay? God intends to redeem this physical creation. And so that requires a redemption of this physical creation. So let me go to the screen share and make my point here. Here we go. There we go. And screen share it again. There we are. Satan corrupted this creation. He gained a level of control. I don't like it. Okay, but he is the great usurper, and he is usurped. And man was put at vice regent. And when man fell, Satan gained authority over this physical world. And just check out the news lately if you don't believe that. If God were to create a new heavens and earth and not redeem this one, God would not have demonstrated his victory over Satan in this realm. Satan could always say, ha, I still succeeded in destroying your creation, the earth and the universe. And the only thing you could manage to redeem was human beings. But I still wrecked it, and you couldn't fix it. And so not only do the promises to the patriarchs and the Old Testament saints require it, but the redemption of this creation, which Jesus died to accomplish, requires it. So why am I not amillennial? Because it doesn't work. But Paul says there are effects to denying the resurrection. First of all, I'm not going to this place where he says it, but he says it in Corinthians. If we do not get resurrected, okay, if there is no resurrection for us, then on what basis did Jesus come in human flesh, taking on a human nature, end up being resurrected? But what if there is no resurrection for me? What advantage is it to me if the dead do not rise? Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. In other words, Paul's saying, look, if there is no reclamation of this body, then there is no rewarding of me in my body. And human beings are designed to be physical and spiritual creatures both. And Paul makes that very clear. He does not want to be unclothed without a glorified physical body. And he says, look, if there is no resurrection, then I have every reason to let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. There is no reward system. There is no honoring of my service in this body if this body is not resurrected. So there's some real effects to this doctrine. Okay? Well, we're getting there. I am so thrilled that this broadcast is working out, because this is really important stuff to me and really great stuff. Not that the whole Word of God isn't important, but really drive this home as to how Jesus deals with and why it's important. Physical resurrection is a cardinal doctrine of faith in Messiah. I can't just throw it away. If my friends say the dead can't rise, I could say, well, which is harder, to resurrect somebody or create the universe? Take your pick. Jesus demonstrated the basis for resurrection in the Torah. He silenced the Pharisees, and his argument is grammatically and theologically good. The Pharisees demonstrate a level of being doctrinally correct, and they did preserve the scriptures to a great deal. Their practice stank, which means orthodoxy and orthopraxy must be together. Orthodoxy is right doctrine. Orthopraxy is right walk. And I've heard a third term that I really like, which is orthopesos, which is the right feelings. And so it seems as though there are three. They need to walk together. Christians who are doctrinally orthodox but nasty people are not applying the orthodox doctrine to their lives, and their practice is going not to be good. And God's not going to be pleased. Christians who have really, really nice walks but don't believe what the scriptures say are in danger of heresy. And that's not going to be real appreciated by our God of truth either. And so we need to uphold both. In a naturalistic world that has big problems with miracles, we need to say, guess what? The cool thing is, this body of mine is going to be resurrected, and I'm going to have a place in the kingdom. And that's very much the way a Jewish person would have understood it. So there are good reasons to hold to the resurrection. And it's a doctrine that classical Judaism ended up sharing very much with the followers of Jesus. And so while the Sadducees dismissed the resurrection of Jesus since they didn't believe in resurrection, the Pharisees could not do so. And Paul uses this later on when he's on trial. So that is where we are at. It's been good having a better, it seemed like the crowd was really together tonight. And so this has really been fun. Go back. I did make a correction to last night. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I'm looking forward to creating little blips maybe on Jeff Cran's refrigerator magnet sayings and doing other things. By the way, prayers definitely are welcome. Tomorrow starts the Messianic Zoom Bible study. And so if you're a prayer or a prayer warrior, I'd love to see some people there. I'd love to see some unsaved Jewish people and maybe a few Jewish believers and see that really go off with a bang tomorrow. And I will be with you. Oh, cool. Let me do this here. I will let it know. Now, first of all, I will tell you that our sister Elizabeth here does have her own channel, music and pictures of Australia. So if you've never been, but it doesn't come with some free Vegemite. And then Nate apparently is recipes. So there you go. I'd almost like to know what type of cuisine it is. When I go off, there's still time to type. In fact, what I'll do tonight is I'll give a little extra time. Maybe Nate can tell us what type of cuisine he's doing, because that really interests me. And I want to say thank you to folks. So I'm going to stick this up here. You won't hear me because whenever a video clip's playing, my sound is muffled, but that's okay because you'll hear, you'll have other things going on. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to the brand and stick this up.